Hello, friends. This is Paul, and I hope you're enjoying wandering through nature with me each week. Well, if you enjoy wandering through nature and you enjoy journaling those wanderings, in other words, writing down or drawing whatever you find out there on our adventures, well, I've got an awesome nature journal for you. Yeah, I have 3 different nature journals with 3 different covers on them. The insides are pretty much the same, lots of blank pages for you to write and draw all your experiences and your feelings while you're wandering through nature. The covers are different on each one of the 3. And I also, for the young at heart or the youngsters who wander through nature with you, I have a children's nature journal, which is a guided nature journal. Lots of pages filled with ideas and suggestions for adventures in nature. Maybe they want to go exploring nature at night, doing a bug night. Well, they can do that with my suggestions, and they can write everything down in their journal. And of course, I did leave some pages blank for the youngsters to actually fill them out. Where can you get these awesome journals? Well, they're available now on Amazon. Yeah, Amazon.com. Do a search for author Paul Farringer, and you'll find the Nature Wanderer journals. And I'm in the middle of creating some new ones, so keep an eye out and grab those journals while they're available. Have a great day and keep wandering through nature. Hello, friends. I'm Paul, and of course, this is the Nature Wanderer podcast. I'd like to welcome you today. Earlier this week, I was actually wandering around in my own backyard. I was exploring a little bit, but I was also just going for a nice hike, seeing what the autumn has to offer, what the early winter has to offer. And I was exploring, and it was getting pretty noisy out there. You see, I live in an open field. There are some trees. Part of my property is wooded. Down below me, I've got a house, and then beyond that, there's more woods. And so there's woods down to the southern part of my house, south of my house. Up to the north, just above me, my neighbor has an open field. It's a hay field. He hays it. And then beyond that, there's a house. Another open field, and then there's a large farm, an old farm. It's been there a while. It's got some old barns on it. It's a cattle farm, a cow farm. Anyhow, the reason I'm bringing up the geography here is it got noisy because just on the other side of the field above me, the hay field, there's a line of trees, and that line of trees was just loud. It was filled with birds, starlings. Starlings had gathered in those trees, and they had just packed the trees. It was just full of these birds, and they were calling and noisy, and oh boy, were they noisy. And it reminded me of the summertime. I don't see this much this time of year, mostly because I'm not sitting out on my porch after work. I'm usually inside. So in the summertime, when I'm sitting out on my porch in the afternoon, I'll see, well, actually it's more early evening, just before the sun starts to set, I see these huge flocks of birds fly over from the north, headed south. And then all of a sudden you'll see another big flock of birds flying over. And they're so large, these flocks, they are noisy. You can actually hear. It's almost like a loud rustle of winds. It's the wing beats. So all these birds are flying over, and it always catches my attention, my wife's attention, and of course my dog's attentions too. They're watching these birds fly over. It's kind of neat to see. Now during the morning hours, they're flying over to the north. I usually miss it. They're probably going in smaller groups, but you see they're headed up to the farm where all the seed is. All the feed for the cows. They're in the barns eating whatever's left over, whatever's hanging out. They're in the hay eating some of the seed from the grasses there. So they like to hang out at the farm because there's a lot of food there. But there's not a lot of safety, not a lot of shelter. So they head to the woods in the evening for the shelter, for the safety. So you get these massive flocks all together heading down to the woods all together. And it reminded me, as I was walking in the field and seeing all these birds up in the trees there, all the starlings up there, that this is the time of year that the birds are starting to basically congregate, to hang out together. Always at the start of winter, a lot of birds will start to gather into groups. Even birds that are normally solitary, that like to be alone, they start to congregate more this time of year. And there's several different reasons, but the main reason is survival. Yeah, the other reasons fall into that one category of survival. They're trying to stay alive. Winters are tough here in Western New York. They get cold, snow, lack of food. The plants die off, or I should say the plants go dormant. Some do die off for the winter. Others will go dormant, but it's harder to find seed. It's harder to find food. It's hard to find insects. That's why a lot of birds actually head south for the winter. They migrate south because there isn't a lot of food around here. So it does get harsh here in the winter. The ones that migrate south are also gathering together. They're forming these large groups. And now that's mostly for protection from predators. And it's also partly for help with navigation. And it helps them to fly easier. Helps them to fly with less energy. Have you ever seen a flock of geese flying over in that V shape, or the messy V as I like to call it? It's not always the perfect V. Sometimes it's a little bit longer on one side, shorter on the other. Sometimes it's got a little curve to it, but it's one bird behind another, forming that V. You see, the reason that they do that is the guy in the front, that goose that's in the head, he is taking all of the wind right at him. So he's putting up the most energy, and the other birds are actually drafting off of that bird. So the lead bird is sending the wind currents off to the side. So if the other birds behind them, behind that lead bird, the two guys right behind them, are actually feeding off of that draft. They're hanging out in that draft where there isn't much wind, isn't much breeze. That way they use less energy to fly. And then the guys behind them, same thing. Guys behind them. That's why they're all in that V. They're heading into that draft. If you're a racing fan, I'm not. Used to be when I was younger, but not anymore. Race cars do it. Race cars draft off of another car to help them save gas. Until it's time, this guy's going too slow, I'm going to go flying around him. It's time to get the lead. But the guy in the lead is using more gas than the guys behind them. So it's drafting. That's what these geese are doing. Now you may wonder, that poor guy in the front. Well, if you watch them long enough, they're not stupid. They know that guy in the front is going to get tired. And when he does start getting tired, he just kind of drifts to the back. And one of the two that was drafting off of that main bird, they go to the front now. They're now the lead bird, getting all the wind current right on them. So they take turns being the lead. When they get tired, head to the back where they don't have to use as much energy. Now, another thing that they do, being in large groups, is they're protected more from predators. And that happens in two different ways. First of all, there's safety in numbers. If one of the birds is being picked on, all the others can go and, guard them. Doesn't always happen. You don't want to mess with a hawk, even if you've got 20 of you. And that's where the other way comes in. The other way of protection. That hawk looks down and says, "Oh, wow, that's a lot of birds there. I don't want to mess with them." And the hawk leaves them alone. So larger numbers will actually dissuade the predator from coming down and eating the prey. And now the third thing that I talked about was navigation. Yeah, the birds actually help each other navigate. I mean, they're going on, Scientists are still studying it. No one really knows how these birds get from point A to point B every single winter. I mean, in the fall, they go from the north, maybe up in Canada, all the way down to maybe Florida or Mexico. And some of these birds were born up north. How do they know which way to go? Well, they've done a lot of studies, and they found that it's a combination of things. One of the things that they believe it is they're using the magnetic fields of the earth to guide them. Other studies show that they're using the stars. That's why some birds fly at nighttime. They're using the sun and the moon. They're using a lot of different things. They are also doing studies that show that some birds are actually using landmarks. Landmarks like buildings and ponds and lakes and cities. They're using those landmarks to help guide them along their way. So if something changes, it kind of messes them up. So there's a lot of different ways that they're navigating. But if you have an older bird who's been this way before, he's going to help the other birds so they can actually find their way. So migration is a tough thing to do. You're trying to get from way up north all the way to the warmer climate where there's more food to find. So it takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of time. And so these birds gather in numbers so that they can survive. They can make it easier on themselves to get down to where they're going, their wintering grounds. Now, a lot of animals, not just birds, gather together in the winter time. I know I've been talking all about birds because I heard those birds and I saw them in the summertime flying over my house. Well, a lot of animals will gather in groups. Now, there are some animals that stay in these large groups. They live in these groups. Other animals, other mammals or insects, they are solitary and they will form the groups when they need to. Even some birds do this. They'll form a group in the wintertime when they need to. Chickadees. I mean, I see chickadees together all the time in the summertime, but they're not really a flock species, except in the wintertime. They gather together to stay warm. Blue jays, same thing. Blue jays love to be solitary during the summer, but in the wintertime, they will gather together for a lot of different reasons. Food, protection, warmth. Yeah, birds and other animals will gather together in groups to stay warm. It's cold up here in the wintertime, really cold. And if you want to survive the cold winters, you want to gather into groups for warmth. And you also want to do, once again, the protection thing. Oh, an animal that's really good in groups for protection is the zebra. Yeah, zebras, they actually have the stripes for a reason. The stripes help to confuse predators. You see all these stripes going all different directions, all together in a large group. It's hard to depict one animal from another. They all look like one huge black and white stripe. So it confuses the predators, and the predators have a much harder time trying to capture any one single animal. So confusion is another reason that they gather together. Helps protect from predators. Now, I've been talking a lot about protection. Well, some animals will actually gather in groups to hunt. Yeah, the predators themselves will actually hunt in groups. Now, it seems strange because a lot of predators are very solitary. They will hunt alone because they don't want to share their food. They go after the kill, like a hawk, eagles, owls. They're usually very solitary because when they spend all that energy to catch an animal, it's usually just enough food for themselves. So they don't want to waste their time catching a lot of animals for a lot of other owls. But some animals look at it in the other way. For instance, wolves. Wolves will actually hunt in packs. They hunt in groups so that they can help each other take down larger animals. So wolves will hunt elk up in Canada or moose. They can take down these larger animals which will feed a larger group. they can also find the animals more. It's easier to find the animals if you're in a group because you can spread out a little bit more and you can spot an animal and let the others know, and then everyone goes and gets it. Turkey vultures are great at this. Turkey vultures hang out in large groups because it helps them to hunt, helps them find their prey better. Of course, they're not really killing other animals, they're finding roadkill. But once they spot the roadkill, they can let all their buddies know and everyone goes down and gets it. Easier to find the food if you are spread out and you're looking around in a lot of different places. So the predators as well as the prey animals will do this grouping thing, this congregating. Now, other animals will form groups to help with basically keeping the group together and alive, survival once again. They spread out the division of work, let's put it that way. So they help each other out with different jobs. One animal alone is going to have to do every single job. They're going to get tired pretty quickly. So it's so much easier if you have a large group and you kind of share the wealth. You spread out the jobs so that not one animal is doing all the work. And a really good example that I think everyone knows about are bees. Yeah, honeybees especially. They have jobs in the hive. Some are helping rear the young. Others are going out to collect pollen. Others are guarding the hive. And then, of course, you have the queen who is laying the eggs. You have some that are making the honey. You have some. So everyone has their job in the hive. But it's not just insects, not just bees. Meerkats are another one who actually have jobs in their colony. So a meerkat will have different jobs like raising the young, maybe gathering food. They have some certain meerkats that will dig the holes, others that are on guard. So everyone has their job so that it helps the colony to survive, helps the group to survive. Another reason for this gathering is community, helping each other rear the young, grooming. It's kind of hard to pick those gnats out of your fur if you can't reach it way in the back. So a good example is monkeys. Monkeys are great at community. There's a lot of different bird species that do this too, where they help raise each other young. But monkeys will help to raise their young. They will help with grooming each other. Have you ever sat at a zoo or seen a documentary about monkeys or apes, any of the primates, where one's sitting there and the other one's sitting right behind and they're picking all the little gnats or bugs out of their fur. So they're helping to groom each other. Now, another one that's good at helping to care for the young in a group are elephants. Elephants will take it a little bit further than just helping each other to raise their young. They are also very intent on protecting their young. You got to realize the young is the survival of the species. They're going to grow up to be the adults sometime if they make it to adulthood. So you have to protect them. Elephants will actually attack in groups, a predator. The predator is usually after the young because they're the smallest and the weakest. So the larger elephants will gang up together and surround the babies. They'll form a circle around the babies, protecting them. Now, another reason for this grouping together is breeding. Now, you have a group of a species, there's more selection. You don't have to go around looking for a mate. They're all right there in your community, in your group. So it does help with breeding. And once again, harsh climate. Yeah, I keep looking out the window, seeing all the snow coming down and all the snow on the ground, and I know it's cold out there. These animals group together to help survive during harsh climate situations like winters or during storms. They'll group together to find a place to hide away together. So all of this is grouping together to help them survive. During the winter time, snakes will actually go into a hibernaculum. Snakes don't like to be around each other. They like to be very solitary. But in the winter time, there aren't a lot of places for them to hide. So they find a great big hole, maybe an old abandoned hole from a fox or a groundhog, and they go into that hole together. And they stay warm together, and they hibernate throughout the winter in that hibernaculum. So now all these animal groups that I was talking about, when wild animals do form these groups, well, humans find a need to give them strange and unusual names sometimes. Yeah. Have you ever heard the different names that they have for a group of animals? I mean, they didn't give themselves these names. Scientists, they don't really back up these names. They think a lot of them are silly too. But humans, we have a way of giving animals silly names when they form a group. Let's see how familiar you are with these. Anyone know what they call a group of apes? It's actually known as a shrewdness. How about badgers? It's called a cete. C-E-T-E. And this is a good one. It has to be humans that named this, probably around Halloween time. Bats. You're probably thinking maybe a flock because they have wings. No, it's not a flock of bats. It's a cauldron of bats, like the witch's cauldron. And one that I think is funny, with bears, a group of bears is either known as a sleuth or a sloth. Now, a sloth is actually an animal, so doesn't that get a little confusing? Oh, look at the sloth when you're talking about a group of bears. And everyone's looking up in the trees looking for a slow-moving animal. No, that's what you call a group of bears. How about buffalo? Group of buffaloes. Well, there's a couple of names for them. It's either a gang or an obstinacy. And how about donkeys? Donkeys, we call a group of donkeys a pace. Have you ever seen elephants when they're in a group walking down a trail together and they look like they're forming a parade? Well, that's what they call a group of elephants, a parade. A group of elk is known as a gang. A group of fox is known as a leash, or you can call it a skulk or an earth. Yeah, there's a lot of different names for a group of fox. It's a good thing fox don't usually hang out in groups, but if you do see a bunch of fox together, you can call it an earth. Giraffes are known as a tower. Gorillas are a band. That one you may have known. A group of hippopotamuses. What do you call a group of hippopotamuses? Okay, let's think about it. Large animals hang out in the water. What would you call a bunch of them hanging out together? And they usually do hang out together. Well, we're going to call it there's two different terms, either a bloat or you can call them a thunder. Hyenas, you may know this one. Any guesses? Everyone's screaming in their cars right now. It's a cackle. Yes, it is a cackle. Jaguars are called a shadow. A group of jaguars. Probably because they're so fast, all you usually see is the shadow. Kangaroos are known as a troop or a mob. Lemurs are a conspiracy. In a little while, I'm going to tell you another animal that's called a conspiracy too. Leopards are leaping leopards. Yeah, group of leopards is known as a leap. And everyone knows what you call a group of lions. A pride. Yep. How about moles? The moles in your yard. I know, you're thinking they're a pain in the neck because they keep digging all these trenches through my yard in the winter under the snow. Well, those guys are pretty busy under the snow all winter, which is why a group of them is known as a labor. A labor of moles. And monkeys, of course, you probably already know is a troop, or there's another name, a barrel. Yeah, a barrel of monkeys. Mules are a pack, a span, or a baron. Otters are known as a romp. Porcupines. This is a good one. This is one of my favorite group names. If you ever see porcupines together, which you usually don't, they're usually pretty solitary, but if you do happen to see a group of porcupines, you call them a prickle. Yeah, a prickle of porcupines. How about squirrels? Squirrels, a lot of them up in the trees. When you see a group of them hanging out together in the park, you can say, oh, look, there's a dray. Or you can say a scurry. So a dray of squirrel or a scurry of squirrels. Tigers are an ambush or a streak. Whales are a pod. Wolves. Now, we've always known that wolves are called a pack. So a group of wolves is known as a pack. Or you can call them a root or a route when they're in movement, when they're moving along. So let's get to the birds. Those are mammals, when mammals hang out in groups. Now, when birds hang out in groups, you may have buzzards, which are known as a wake. Bobolinks. So I love the bobolinks up in my field. Every spring, they hang out and they nest in the field above me, the hay field. I've been getting them in my field now too. So the bobolinks, when they're in a group, they're known as a chain. So a chain of bobolinks. Cormorants. Cormorants are a water bird. They're known as a gulp. And one of my favorites here, I get these guys all the time in my yard, crows. Crows are known as a murder, or you can call them a horde. I've always called them the murder. I always like to say, oh, there's a murder of crows. One day I was driving down the road. My grandson was in the car. He says, oh, look, there's a murder. And he just open wide looked at me like, what are you talking about? Yeah, it was a group of crows there. Now, how about ravens? We'll stick with the same family. Well, ravens are not known as a murder. You would think they would be because they're in the same family as the crows, the corvids. Well, crows are known as a murder. Ravens are known as an unkindness. So, an unkindness of ravens. How about doves? When you have a whole group of doves hanging out in your yard, you can call them a duel or pitying. Now, ducks. Ducks are known as a brace, or you can call them a flock when they're in flight. You can call them a team. If they're in the water, you can call them a raft. So they get different names for their group depending on where they are. Eagles. Eagles, when they're in a group, are known as a convocation. Finches, a charm. Flamingos are a stand. Geese are a flock, of course, or you can call them a gaggle of geese if they're on the ground. Or if they're in flight, you can call them a skein of geese. Hawks are a cast, a kettle if they're in flight, or you can call them a boil if you see two or more of them spiraling in the air. They are known as a boil. Herons. I get a lot of great blue heron around my area, especially in the summertime, not so much in the winter, but every once in a while I do see them in the winter if there's open water. Herons are known as a sedge or a siege. Jays, like blue jays, are a party or a scold. Yeah, a lot of people do scold them when they're eating all their seed or shoveling it out of the bird feeders, especially when they're in a group in the winter time. Mallards are known as a sword, S-O-R-D, if they're in flight, or you can call them a brace. Owls. If you have a group of owls, and like I was saying earlier, they're usually very solitary. They don't like to be together, but you may see a group of owls every once in a while, and you have to call them a parliament. How about a partridge? Getting close to the holidays here. Partridge in a pear tree. Hey, what do you have when you have a group of partridge? Anyone know? It's called a covey. How about penguins? Yeah, this is an easy one. Everyone should know it's a colony, but did you know there's other names? You can call penguins not just a colony in a group, but a muster, maybe a parcel, or a rookery. Pheasants are a nest, a nide, a nye, or a bouquet. A bouquet of pheasants. Sparrows are known as a host. And all those starlings that were hanging out on the tree the other day, and I'm sure they're out there this evening too, waiting to go flying over the house and head to the protection of the woods, those starlings are known as a murmuration. So a murmuration of starlings. Storks are a mustering, swans are a bevy, a game, or in flight you can call them a wedge. Turkeys in a group, a rafter, or a gang. Woodpeckers, when they're in a group, you call them a descent. Now, let's talk about reptiles and amphibians. If you have a group of frogs, it's known as an army of frogs. Yet toads, who are very similar to frogs, are not known as an army, they're known as a knot. Turtles, a bale, or you can call them a nest of turtles. How about a maelstrom of salamanders? Or a nest of snakes? And moving on to your invertebrates, bees, of course, are known as a swarm if they're in a large group, or a hive, or you can call them a grist. Caterpillars are known as an army. Cockroaches are an intrusion. Oh, yes, they are. Cockroaches are an intrusion when they're in a group. How about flies when you have a group of flies together? Anyone know that one? It's known as a business. Business of flies. Grasshoppers, a cloud. If you've ever seen a large group that looks like a cloud, I'd be running for cover. Yep. Snails in the group are known as a hood. So those are some of the different animal group names. So now when you see these groups out there of animals, when they're getting ready to gather together in the winter time for safety, for staying warm, for protection, now you know what to call them. And if you have any other names to add to the list that I gave, I mean, I do have some other ones, but I didn't want to fill up an hour with all the names of animals. But if you have other names, feel free to send me a note and I'll try to include them in the show notes. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me today. Get out and explore nature and maybe you'll start seeing those animals grouping together. Yeah, don't hibernate just because the cold weather's here. Don't head south. Don't migrate. Don't hibernate. Get out and explore nature. And of course, as usual, don't forget to invite your friends to listen to the podcast. Don't forget to rate and review. You can support the podcast through Patreon or Ko-Fi. The links are in the show notes. And don't forget, I got some new nature journals available on Amazon. I'll leave the links for those in the show notes too. So if you want to write down all your experiences, your wanderings through nature, grab one of the nature journals. And they're brand new. I have a children's nature journal that I put out. It's more of a guided nature journal to help the young ones to explore nature and write down what they're experiencing and seeing. So get out and explore nature and enjoy the rest of your day. And don't forget, keep exploring the nature around you. Did you know that plastic is made with oil, a fossil fuel that pollutes the environment? And did you know that only about 15% of all plastic is recycled into new products? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could live our lives without plastic so that we could stop harming the planet? Well, there's a company that wants to help you do just that. Life Without Plastic sells products that will reduce or eliminate your dependence on plastic. They have a large selection from toothbrushes to food storage containers to drinking straws, all plastic free. And it's reasonably priced. So what are you waiting for? Check out all these great plastic-free products and help save the planet. Just click on the link in the show notes to find out more and to start your journey to being plastic-free.